My name's Jason, and for most of my adult life, I believed I had built something solid. Predictable. Reliable. I wasn't chasing thrills or drama, I was chasing peace. A steady job in finance, a modest home just outside Columbus, and a marriage that, from the outside, probably looked like the embodiment of stability. Rachel and I had been together for 9 years. Married for 6. Long enough to accumulate shared traditions, grocery lists with inside jokes, and a bathroom drawer full of her bobby pins and my razors tangled together like they were meant to be that way. But if I'm being honest, I think part of me had stopped paying attention. You fall into rhythms, you trust the routine. You assume that because no one's yelling, everything is fine. Maybe that's why the red flags didn't register at first, because they didn't wave, they whispered. It started on a random Thursday. Nothing special about it. I came home late from work, exhausted from back-to-back meetings. Rachel had texted earlier saying she was meeting up with her girlfriends for dinner. I figured I'd just reheat the leftover spaghetti from the night before and crash early. I wasn't expecting anything unusual. But when I came downstairs after a quick shower, I found her standing in front of the hallway mirror, applying her lipstick with a level of focus she usually reserved for formal events. She was wearing this black dress, tight, low-cut, with a slit up the side that made me pause. It wasn't something I'd seen in a while. Her hair was curled in soft waves, framing her face just right. And the heels tall, glossy, unapologetically bold. She looked stunning, like the version of herself she used to bring out on New Year's or date nights in our early days. But this time, it wasn't for me. I leaned against the kitchen doorframe, still holding my dinner plate. Wow. Big night? She barely glanced over. Girls' night, she said, adjusting an earring. I tried to smile, but something in my chest tightened. You always dress up this much for tacos and margaritas? That got me a look. Not an angry one, more like the kind someone gives a child asking too many questions. I haven't seen them in weeks. We're just catching up. Don't wait up. And just like that, she grabbed her purse, stepped into her heels, and walked out the door. No kiss. No love you. Not even a goodbye that sounded real. Just a cold gust of air as the door clicked shut and her perfume hung in the hallway like an afterthought. I stood there for a full minute, the silence ringing in my ears. The spaghetti on my plate had already started to cool, but I hadn't taken a single bite. I set the plate down on the counter and walked into the living room, flipping on the TV more for background noise than anything else. I kept telling myself I was overreacting. Rachel had always been independent. Just because she looked good tonight didn't mean she was doing anything wrong. She deserved to have fun with her friends, didn't she? Still, something didn't sit right. She hadn't said which friends. Usually she'd mention names. Katie, Lauren, Julie. But tonight it was just girls' night. Vague. Uncharacteristically vague. The show playing on the TV faded into the background as my mind began combing through recent weeks. Little changes. New habits. A few times she came home late and said she'd been stuck in traffic, but she hadn't been stressed about it, just oddly detached. Then there was her phone. She used to leave it face up on the coffee table, but lately it was always clutched in her hand or slipped into her back pocket, screen down. She'd started taking it into the bathroom with her. I noticed that a couple of weeks back and brushed it off. Everyone scrolls while brushing their teeth, right? But even in the middle of the night, if she got up to use the restroom, the phone went with her. Like it needed guarding. And the perfume, that was new too. Spicy, musky, expensive. Not the fresh floral scent she usually wore. The kind of scent you wear to impress someone. There were also those comments she started making out of nowhere. Subtle digs. You've been really distracted lately. It's like you're not even here when we talk. Maybe if you were more emotionally available, things wouldn't feel so flat. At first, I thought it was just stress. Maybe we were both tired. Life had gotten routine, sure, but I figured that's just what marriage eventually becomes, a comfortable lull. But tonight, the lull felt more like a trapdoor opening beneath my feet. The hours crept by. I tried watching a game, then switched to a comedy special I used to love. Nothing stuck. I couldn't focus. My mind kept wandering back to that dress. The way she said, "Don't wait up." I kept checking the time. 8:40, 9:15, 10:02, still no text. No call. By the time midnight hit, I was lying on our bed fully dressed, staring at the ceiling. My stomach felt twisted in knots, but not from hunger. That quiet kind of dread had settled in, the kind that creeps in when your gut knows something your heart refuses to accept. I closed my eyes, trying to push away the paranoia, but it clung to me. I didn't want to be the suspicious husband. I didn't want to be that guy. But wasn't I allowed to feel weird about how she just left? That's when I heard it, the faint sound of the front door creaking open downstairs. I checked the time. 12:41 a.m. Her heels clicked softly against the hardwood floor. She was trying to be quiet, trying not to wake me. I stayed still, eyes wide open in the dark. The bedroom door didn't open. Instead, I heard her voice. Soft, almost playful, like she was talking on the phone. I couldn't make out the words at first, so I crept to the top of the stairs, staying in the shadows. That's when I heard her laugh. And then, clear as day, her voice carried up through the quiet house. He won't get it, he still thinks everything's fine. Silence. Then another laugh, softer, like she was trying not to be heard. I don't know how long I stood there. Maybe it was 30 seconds. Maybe it was 5 minutes. All I remember is the feeling. Like the air had been *ket out of the house. Like the world tilted slightly off its axis. She thought I was asleep upstairs. She thought she could come home late, make a quiet call, and slide right back into the image of our perfect little life. But I heard her. And suddenly, I didn't feel crazy anymore. I barely slept that night. I stayed perfectly still in bed, my eyes locked on the ceiling, the weight of her words pressing into my chest like a cinder block. He still thinks everything's fine. Over and over, it echoed in my mind like a sick little loop. The casual cruelty of it. The way she laughed afterward. Not nervous. Not regretful. Just amused. Like I was a punchline in some story she was telling to someone else. At some point, I must have dozed off. When I opened my eyes again, light was pouring through the window. The house was quiet, too quiet. Rachel was already up, maybe even already gone. That was becoming normal. She used to wait for me to wake up. We'd have coffee together on weekends, talk about our plans for the day. Lately, she was always one step ahead of me, out of the house before I had even registered she was there. I dragged myself downstairs and found a sticky note on the counter, brunch with Katie. Don't forget to take out the trash, it's getting gross. Love you. A heart drawn next to the words like it made the message more affectionate. I stared at it for a long time. Not because of what it said, but because I knew deep in my bones Katie wasn't who she called last night. I didn't have proof yet, but something about the way she said that name, the effortless placement, like she knew it would disarm me, made me feel like I was being handled. I spent that morning going through memories. Not just the big ones, our wedding, our honeymoon, the first time we hosted Thanksgiving, but the little things. The tiny details that made up the day-to-day glue of a marriage. The way she used to hum when folding laundry. The way she'd fall asleep on the couch during movies, her head tilted just enough to catch the light. The way she'd grab my hand in the grocery store for no reason at all. Had all of that been real? Or had it faded so slowly I didn't notice until it was gone? I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee gone cold, scrolling through my camera roll. Old photos, candids of us at parks, brunch spots, vacations we could barely afford. Smiles that seemed genuine. Or maybe they were just good performances. I don't know. It's strange how quickly your brain starts to question everything when trust begins to crack. Like a dam, it only takes one hairline fracture before the whole thing starts leaking. I kept going back to the night before. The tone in her voice. That laugh. The absolute certainty in the way she said, he still thinks everything's fine. She knew she was lying. She knew I believed her. And she liked it. That was the part that stung the most. Not just the betrayal, the enjoyment of it. I started paying more attention. Over the next few days, I watched her like I'd never watched her before. It was like I'd been blind for years and suddenly someone turned the lights on. Every smile felt a little too perfect. Every excuse a little too polished. She said she was going out to lunch with coworkers but came back with makeup a shade darker than she left with. Said she had to work late, but I checked the office calendar and found no meetings scheduled past 4 p.m. One night, we were sitting on the couch and her phone lit up with a notification. She was holding it in her hand, but the second the screen lit up, she tilted it away from me just slightly. A reflex. Not even conscious, maybe? But obvious. It was a text, and though I didn't see the whole message, I caught one word before she dismissed it. Last night. She noticed me looking and smiled quickly, too quickly. Work group chat. They're always talking nonsense after hours. I nodded, pretending to believe her. I didn't say a word, just gave her that tired smile she'd grown used to. The one that made it easier for her to keep underestimating me. But inside, something shifted. That was the moment I knew for sure. She wasn't slipping. She was gone. The woman sitting beside me laughing at some Netflix comedy wasn't the woman I married. She looked the same, sounded the same, even smelled the same, but she wasn't her. That person, the one who used to call me at lunch just to hear my voice, the one who used to leave silly notes in my jacket pockets during winter, she was gone. Replaced by someone else. Someone calculating. Someone cruel. And still, I couldn't confront her. Not yet. I needed more than feelings. I needed more than I have a bad vibe. People don't admit to things they're not forced to. And if I was going to rip off this Band-Aid, I needed to be sure. The memory that pushed me over the edge came later that week. I was taking out the trash, just like her note had said, and I saw something in the bathroom garbage can, a piece of tissue with smudged lipstick on it. Normally, that wouldn't mean anything. But this was a shade of red I hadn't seen her wear in months. She used to stick to light pinks and neutral tones. Now it was bold, striking crimson. A color you wear when you're trying to be noticed. That night, as I brushed my teeth, I opened her side of the bathroom cabinet. I found a bottle of perfume tucked in the back, brand new, still in the box. Expensive. Definitely not something she bought on a whim. It wasn't the scent she wore for me. It was heavier. More mature. More, in asterisk, mate. It hit me all at once. This was real. This wasn't a phase. This wasn't stress. This wasn't about me being emotionally distant or too focused on work. Those were just the excuses she gave herself. This was a full-fledged shift into another life. One that didn't include me. Back upstairs, she was already in bed, scrolling her phone. I climbed in beside her and stared at the ceiling. "Do you think we've changed?" I asked. She looked over at me, surprised. "What do you mean?" "I don't know. Just, does this still feel like us?" She smiled, a soft smile, like I'd said something sweet instead of something terrifying. "You always get weird when you're tired." Then she leaned over, kissed my cheek, and went back to her screen. And I lay there in the dark, thinking, she didn't answer the question. The day I checked the security footage was the day I stopped making excuses. I wish I could say I did it in a blaze of righteous anger, but the truth is, I hesitated. 4 hours. Maybe even days, depending on when you start counting. Our house had a basic security system, just a couple of cameras covering the front porch, driveway, and the back entrance that led into the kitchen. We installed them a few years back, mostly for peace of mind. Package theft, raccoons, whatever. I never once thought I'd use them to verify whether my wife was lying to me. But something about that night, that dress, that laugh, that call she thought I hadn't heard made me feel like I had to. I needed certainty. Because until then, even with all the signs, there was still a voice in my head whispering, maybe you're wrong. Maybe she really is just going through something. Maybe this is salvageable. So I sat down at the computer in my office, hands cold, throat dry, and pulled up the footage from 2 nights ago. The night she went out in that black dress. The night she said she was meeting the girls. I scrubbed through the first few hours, Rachel getting ready, walking past the hallway, camera in her heels, adjusting her hair in the mirror. No surprises there. Then came the part where she left through the front door. The timestamp read 7:12 p.m. But something didn't add up. Because around 6:53 p.m., about 20 minutes earlier, the back camera picked up a car pulling into our driveway. It was a dark gray sedan. Newer model. Tinted windows. I didn't recognize it. The car idled for a few seconds before the passenger door opened. A man stepped out. Late 30s, maybe early 40s. Tall. Dressed casual, but sharp, like he wanted to look effortless and still be noticed. He didn't go to the front door. He walked around the side of the house and disappeared out of frame toward the back entrance. That entrance doesn't have a doorbell. Just a keypad. A code only Rachel and I knew. 15 seconds later, the camera in the kitchen picked up movement. There he was. Walking through our home like he belonged there. And then, her. Rachel appeared in the hallway, same black dress, but barefoot now. Hair not quite finished. And something else, she wasn't wearing underwear. That's how casually she greeted him. Like this wasn't new. Like this wasn't the first time. He kissed her. She kissed him back. And just like that, every illusion I had left cracked and fell apart. I didn't keep watching. I didn't need to. The footage was time-stamped. I knew when he arrived. I knew how long he stayed. I knew that he left through the back door again at 7:09 p.m., 3 minutes before Rachel strolled out the front, smiling at her reflection, off to her girls' night. I sat there in the dark office, watching the screen go still, my fingers numb on the mouse. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't even move. Because when truth hits that hard, it doesn't come with fireworks. It comes like a sudden lack of oxygen, silent and suffocating. All I could think was, this is real? This is actually happening. I didn't sleep that night. I stayed in the office until sunrise, just sitting there, heart hollow, mind racing. You think you'll be angry when you catch someone cheating. You think you'll want to break something, punch a wall, confront them on the spot. But that's not what it felt like. It felt like mourning. Like watching someone die, except they're still alive and they're lying next to you in bed. The next morning, I got up, made coffee like usual, and acted like nothing had changed. She came downstairs in a robe, gave me a peck on the cheek, and asked if we needed more eggs. I looked at her, really looked at her, and realized how many years I'd spent loving someone who had quietly stopped loving me. I didn't say anything that day. Not yet. I didn't want rage to cloud the facts. I needed to be ready. Not just to accuse her, but to accept it myself. To know that I wasn't misreading or overreacting or projecting. I had video. I had timestamps. I had evidence. I had the truth. That evening when she got home from running errands, I was sitting on the couch waiting. Not pacing. Not glaring. Just still. She walked in and paused when she saw me. "Hey," she said slowly. "Everything okay? Can we talk?" I asked, my voice calm. Too calm. She hesitated. "Sure. What's up?" I looked at her, and for a moment, the weight of everything hit me again. The years. The memories. The stupid vacations we barely afforded. The nights we stayed up talking about the future. The miscarried pregnancy we cried through together. All of it felt like it belonged to a different life. "Where were you Wednesday night?" I asked. She blinked. "I told you I went out with the girls." "Why? Which girls?" She paused. "Katie. And Lauren. Why are you asking this now?" I leaned forward, elbows on my knees, and just watched her face. "I looked at the security footage," I said. Her face didn't change right away. She was good. I'll give her that. But a fraction of a second later, I saw it. That flicker of fear. That micro-expression of oh no before the mask snapped back on. "What footage?" she asked, like she didn't know. "The back door. The hallway." I saw everything. For a long time, she didn't speak. She just stood there frozen. Then she sat down across from me and exhaled like the act of pretending had finally worn her out. "I didn't mean for it to happen," she said quietly. "I didn't say anything. It wasn't supposed to be anything. It just happened." I still didn't speak. "I felt lost," she continued. "Like I was fading. Like you didn't see me anymore. He made me feel a..." "Stop," I said. My voice was flat, but firm. "Don't explain. I don't want to hear it." She looked up at me, surprised. "Jason," she said, almost pleading. "I don't want to lose you completely." And that's when I realized what this really was. She didn't love me. She loved the version of her life where I was still there to keep things stable. To pay the bills. To mow the lawn. To play husband while she played dress-up with someone else behind my back. She wasn't sorry she did it. She was sorry she got caught. "I know," I said quietly. "That's the part that hurts the most." And I got up and walked out of the room. After our conversation, if you could call it that, the air in the house changed. It was thicker. Heavier. Like every word we didn't say hung in the corners of every room, watching us. I didn't confront her again right away. I didn't scream or demand explanations. I'd already gotten all the answers I needed. But the strange part? She stayed. She made breakfast the next morning. Asked if I wanted toast. Talked about some sale at Target like we hadn't just detonated our marriage the night before. I played along. Not because I believed in pretending, but because I needed to watch her to see how far she would go trying to act like this was normal. She had switched into damage control. That much was clear. She was trying to steer the ship back to shore even though it was already sunk. For the next 2 days, I barely left the house. I called off work. Didn't check email. Didn't answer texts. I walked the perimeter of our yard like I was looking for some piece of clarity I'd dropped in the grass. I'd stand in the kitchen and stare at the fridge, not because I was hungry, but because it was filled with photos, her holding our niece at her baptism, us hiking in Oregon, our anniversary dinner at that tiny Italian place with terrible lighting but amazing pasta. I didn't take them down. Not yet. I wanted to remember that once upon a time I was happy here, even if it was with someone who wasn't. On the third evening, I asked her to sit down. She looked nervous. She'd been avoiding eye contact all day, floating around the house like a ghost with errands. Cleaning things that didn't need cleaning. Folding laundry that wasn't dirty. I think a part of her hoped I would let it slide, that I'd bury it and try to build something new on top of the wreckage. But I couldn't do that. You don't build anything stable on top of lies. I sat at the dining room table, the one we bought from that estate sale years ago, the one she'd always said had character. She came into the room slowly, as if being summoned to a courtroom, not a conversation. She sat across from me. Hands in her lap. Shoulders drawn tight. I didn't look at her right away. I was too busy rehearsing my words in my head. But when I finally did meet her eyes, I didn't see my wife anymore. I saw a stranger wearing her face. "I want to ask you something," I said. She nodded. "How long?" She didn't pretend to misunderstand. She didn't stall. She just looked down and whispered, "Almost 5 months." I nodded, though the answer still hit me like a punch to the stomach. "And this man, who is he?" She flinched. "Someone from the gym. We met in a class. He paid attention to me." I didn't respond. She went on like the silence demanded explanation. At first, it was just flirting. Then he asked for coffee. I said no. But then I said yes. And then it was dinner. And then it wasn't dinner anymore. I stared at her. Not with hatred, but with the detached curiosity you'd give a stranger who just told you something disturbing on a plane. Like, how do you live with yourself? And me? I asked quietly. What was I? She looked like she might cry. Safe, she said. You were always safe. That was the moment I stopped feeling sad. I wasn't her husband anymore, I was her shelter. Her cushion. The guy who kept the bills paid and the lights on while she played pretend in another life. I don't want to hurt you, she said. I gave a bitter laugh. You're 5 months late on that. She reached across the table like she could still salvage something. Jason, I was confused. I didn't mean for it to go this far. But it did, I said, pulling my hand back. And now I can't look at you without seeing that hallway. That kiss? That man walking through our house like he belonged here. She said nothing. I loved you, I told her. I still do in some weird messed up way. But love isn't enough to fix this. Not when the trust is gone. Her chin trembled. I know. Do you? I asked. Because every time you lied, every time you came home and kissed me after being with him, that wasn't confusion. That was a choice. A series of choices. I thought I could control it. I thought I could keep both parts separate. And how'd that work out? She wiped a tear away and didn't answer. I stood up and walked to the kitchen. I needed distance, not just from her, but from everything she'd touched. I stared at the coffee maker. The same one she used every morning. Suddenly, I couldn't stand the sight of it. I'm not going to yell, I said. I'm not going to throw things or make a scene. But I am going to ask you to start packing. She looked up stunned. What? I want you to leave. You can stay at a friend's. A hotel. I don't care. But this house, it's mine again. You lost the right to be here the second you let someone else in. Jason, please? No, I said, turning to face her. You said I was safe. But I'm not your safety net. I'm not your backup plan. I'm not the consolation prize you come back to when the affair fizzles out. I'm a person. And I deserve better. She buried her face in her hands, crying quietly. I walked past her and into the hallway. I didn't want to see her cry. Not because it broke my heart, but because it didn't. And that scared me. How quickly love could rot into indifference. Later that night, after she left the room, I started boxing up her things. Methodically. Carefully. Not like I was angry, more like I was packing up someone who'd died. I found the anniversary pendant I gave her 2 years ago. Still in its box. Still in the drawer. Untouched. How symbolic. I placed it on top of the first box and sealed it shut. That was the moment I stopped feeling like a husband. The next morning, I heard the door open. She had gone to stay at her sister's, but came back to talk. I was in the living room, drinking coffee alone. I didn't look up when she walked in. When she saw the boxes, her breath caught. You already packed my things? I nodded. This is really it? She asked. I stood, walked over, and met her eyes. Today is the last day. She opened her mouth to speak, but I raised a hand. I'm not listening anymore, I said. She didn't argue. She didn't plead. She just nodded. And then she walked back out the door, for the last time. The silence after she left wasn't the kind you hear. It was the kind you feel. It had mass, gravity. It pressed down on me from every corner of the house like the walls themselves were exhaling after holding their breath for too long. For the first hour, I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the floor. The boxes I packed sat stacked near the door, like tombstones. Each one filled with pieces of a life that was no longer mine. And yet no rage, no collapse, just stillness. Maybe that's how you know when something's really over. Not by the shouting, not by the slamming doors. But when you realize there's nothing left to say. No more pleas, no more bargaining. Just a quiet knowing in your chest. This chapter is done. I walked to the closet. Her side was mostly empty now. A few hangers, some stray receipts in the corners. I stood there, looking at the bare space, and something shifted in me. Not grief, not loss, relief. I reached for the last few dresses still hanging and pulled them down one by one. Folded them neatly. No ripping, no dramatic gestures. I didn't want to hurt them, they were just cloth. They weren't to blame. The final item I packed was a soft green sweater she always wore when we watched movies. I remember buying it for her during a trip to Asheville, and she'd made a joke about it being too cozy grandma, until she tried it on. She loved that thing. She said it felt like a hug. I folded it slowly, pressing it down into the last box. That, more than anything, made my throat tighten. Not because of what it meant to her, but because of how far away that memory felt. I wasn't the man she laughed with in that mountain bookstore anymore. She wasn't the woman who kissed me under autumn leaves. We'd both become strangers in a house built by people who used to love each other. When everything was packed, I labeled the boxes with a marker. Rachel. Not her stuff. Not junk. Just her name. Like I was returning something I borrowed that didn't belong to me anymore. The next morning, I woke up to sunlight spilling through the curtains. I hadn't slept that deeply in months. No nightmares. No anxiety gnawing at my chest. Just a strange sense of stillness. I sat up and realized I could breathe. That day, I cleared out the kitchen of everything that reminded me of her. The almond milk she liked but I never drank. The mug with the pun she found hilarious. The gluten-free pancake mix that tasted like regret. All of it went into a donation box. Let someone else turn it into something new. I played music as I cleaned. Loud, old-school stuff I hadn't listened to in years. Tom Petty, Fleetwood Mac. The kind of music I used to play when I was younger, before I spent so much time making room for someone else's preferences. I caught myself singing along. I hadn't done that in a long time either. The day moved slow and so did I, but it felt good, like shedding skin. Around lunch, I found myself in the garage, looking at my old guitar case. It had been gathering dust under the workbench. I used to play all the time, open mics, bar sets, even a few weddings back in the day. But life got busy. Rachel didn't like how loud it was, said it made her head hurt, so I stopped. I pulled the case out, cracked it open, and ran my fingers along the strings. Still in tune, still familiar. I played for hours that afternoon. My fingers hurt. My voice was rusty, but it felt like finding an old version of myself I didn't know I missed. That night, I cooked dinner not from a box, not with microwave instructions. Real food. Something that made the house smell like effort. I sat at the table alone, but I wasn't lonely. I was eating something I made with my own two hands, listening to music I chose, in a house I could finally call mine again. And for the first time in a long time, I felt proud of myself. A few days later, I started going to the gym again. Not for revenge. Not to post shirtless photos or win some post-breakup transformation contest. I went because I wanted to feel strong, capable, alive. The first week was rough. I was sore in places I forgot existed. But each time I walked out of there, sweat-soaked and breathless, I felt like I was pushing grief out of my body one rep at a time. I also took that job promotion I'd been dodging for months. Back when Rachel and I were working on things, I told my boss I wasn't ready for the added stress. I wanted to be home more, wanted to show up for my marriage. But now, that excuse was gone. And honestly, so was the fear. So I said yes, threw myself into it. Started leading projects, mentoring younger team members, speaking up in meetings with a confidence I hadn't felt in years. My coworkers noticed. My friends noticed. Even my mom, who's usually too polite to comment, told me I sounded different on the phone. "You seem lighter," she said. "Happier." And she wasn't wrong. One Saturday morning, I found myself sitting on the porch with a cup of coffee and a notebook. Just writing. Thoughts. Lyrics. Pieces of whatever this was that I'd been surviving. And somewhere between scribbled lines and cold sips, I realized something important. I didn't miss her. I missed the idea of her. The comfort. The habit. The shared history. But her? The woman who lied to me, walked another man through her home, and smiled while I slept upstairs? No. I didn't miss her. And that realization, that clarity, felt like freedom. The healing didn't happen all at once. There were days I'd smell her perfume in a store aisle and feel my stomach twist. Nights I'd roll over in bed expecting her body beside mine, only to find a pillow. Ghosts don't leave without haunting you for a while. But every time I stood back up, every time I chose not to call, not to chase, not to look back, I grew a little stronger. I stopped checking her social media. I unfollowed, then blocked. Not out of spite, out of self-respect. She had her life now. And I was building mine, piece by piece, brick by brick, without her. And honestly, it felt good. Not in a spiteful, look how well I'm doing without you kind of way. But in a quiet, steady, I'm finally becoming who I was always meant to be kind of way. At first, the silence felt like punishment. The kind that echoes. I'd walk through the house and feel like I was trespassing in my own life. But slowly, the silence turned into space. Space to think. To breathe. I started waking up without dread. Morning coffee actually tasted good again. I'd forgotten what that felt like. I reorganized the house not out of spite but to reclaim it. Each change, no matter how small, was a step toward peace. I even caught myself smiling for no reason. That's when I knew I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was beginning. 2 months later, I was in a bookstore downtown when I accidentally bumped into a woman. Leah. Green eyes. Easy laugh. We started talking. Nothing flirty, just real. We ended up at a cafe by the lake. She asked, "Have you ever thought that loss could be the beginning?" And I did something I hadn't done in a long time. I smiled. Because